Welcome to Get Mad. I'm Mad Hildebrandt, and on this episode, we're joined by Jennifer Kurland. Jennifer is the Green Party candidate for governor in Michigan. She is currently a Redford Union school board member, and she has a bachelor's degree in political science from Wayne State University. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, man.
Oh, yes, it's a pleasure to have you here. Let's just begin by having you tell us just a little bit about you.
I ended up going to Michigan State University for a couple of years and fell into a career at Clean Water Action. And I did door-to-door canvassing around our entire state on water issues for 3 years. And I'll say that the worst weather to ever canvass in is hail.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I bet we get some pretty good hail here. I mean, we get some golf balls, or like my little snowman. How about the hail that comes down that size?
And it's not even about it pelting your face when you're walking around, as that nobody wants to open the door when it's hailing on top of that.
Oh yeah, I absolutely.
So I ended up falling into a career in banking, and I worked in retail banking for over a decade. I worked with mainly small business owners and people just struggling through the recession to keep food on the table, keep their businesses open. I bought my house at 24, and it was right before the market crash. And so my starter home turned into my forever home, because still today I could not sell it for what I bought it for. Almost 15 years ago now.
No.
So
yeah,
I got active in my community because I've always been an activist. And so I started going to local township board meetings and became a precinct poll worker and chairperson, and fell into other civic organizations before I decided to run for my local school board in 2012.
Well, that sounds like you've had a good beginning to set you up for for moving on and taking on the governorship.
Yeah.
And so you're talking about, okay, we were joking, of course, about the hail, but that really makes me start thinking about, as we know, global warming, climate change, the environment, so many things that there are to talk about the environment. And I know you're going to have to deal with the ongoing crisis in your own state of Flint. So can you talk for a few minutes about your plans for facing the environment and what's going on?
Absolutely. So the water issues in Michigan are certainly larger than Flint, but I've been talking about how Flint is really the canary in the coal mine for all of these issues around our state. So I've been on the ground in Flint actually since the beginning of 2016. I started going up there after the crisis hit and just volunteering and door knocking, really even just to let people know that there was a crisis, because the state was not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up as a political scientist. My degree is in political science. I did some research. And so I had my own radio show I'm on hiatus for, called The Offensive Feminist with Jenny Kay. And I ended up researching and I created an hour-long documentary on the Flint water crisis. So I've really been advocating for the people of Flint since the beginning. And some of the issues in Flint is not just the issue of lead in the water, but the issue of lead poisoning in children around Michigan. There's actually 43% of the state, of our counties in the state of Michigan, have children with lead poisoning. So this is a larger issue around the state of lead poisoning. We have a larger issue. They're now trying to debate whether or not there are PFAS in the water of the Flint River, which is a growing crisis around our state. This has been a really big deal for people in the St. Clair Shores area. Up north in the Gaylord area, there's an army base that was using the firefighting foam that was spreading PFAS. On the west side of the state, there was a tannery that they were just finding some cancer clusters and realizing it's from PFAS. But in our fish advisories, we know where a lot of these PFAS are in our state. And it's about a third of the counties in our state, and it does include Flint and the Flint River, that have this additional issue of PFAS. And of course, when we talk about other air pollution issues, 93% of the lakes and rivers in the state of Michigan have mercury contamination. And then we have, another issue of PCBs and certainly other chemicals that aren't even tested for. So when we talk about the environment in Michigan, It's really this larger issue of we need to curb pollution, and we need to curb pollution really like 2 decades ago. And
Right.
that I think we can do so. So when I worked for Clean Water Action, we actually worked on a campaign to start charging fees for pollution permits, because before the state was just handing them out without a fee. And so we were able to tack on like a minimal fee. But what we really need to do is we need to start charging companies the true cost of doing business and the true cost of what that permit is. And that's how we're going to be able to stop pollution, because we have to hit them in the pocketbook because they're corporations and that's what they care about.
Right. Right. You know, that makes a lot of sense. And when you're looking at that, and I mean, it just is so heartbreaking to think, you know, that all of this pollution and, you know, the health issues that are going to take place, especially when you're talking about these children who have been poisoned by that lead, because that is something, you know, you don't recover from that. This has affected these children for their entire lives. And so
one of the things that they're actually finding, Mad, in some of the studies is that lead poisoning is epigenetic, which means just like, you know, you as a veteran, I'm sure you're aware of how Agent Orange has been passed on. Lead is the same way, because it's a heavy metal and it's so toxic and it gets into your soft tissue and into your bones, that especially for pregnant women, when your body changes during pregnancy, all of those heavy metals, when your bones get weakened and things like that throughout pregnancy, get into your fetus. And so it gets passed on from generation to generation. And so far, some of the studies are showing that it very well could be 2 generations, and it might be more than 2 generations.
No, it's like the sins of the father thing, just that are going to pass right down. And so that turns us very, very easily to thinking about healthcare, because that, you know, that's something that this generation and their children are going to have to be dealing with, you know, and I know that one of the things that you're talking about, and a lot of, you know, people that are on the left, is healthcare as a human right. So can you talk about healthcare for your state?
Absolutely. So one of the things that I think that's really important is when you talk about Flint, one of the things we have to do is give all of the people of Flint healthcare, because they were poisoned by the state. Therefore, the state is responsible for their medical health. In general, the expense for that is extremely expensive, especially when we have all of this profit in our healthcare. And I certainly, as much as I know we have some great Greens running for Congress this year, I don't think that we're going to get universal healthcare, single-payer healthcare on the federal level anytime soon. So one of the things that I think we can do in the state of Michigan is create a gap insurance that is going to not stop the federal money coming in from Medicare and Medicaid and other like My Child type things, but we need to be able to help everybody in the state of Michigan. But be really careful about how we raise taxes in Michigan. So it can't just be a tax, because we have some caps based on state revenue and how much we can raise taxes in Michigan. So we can't really make it a tax, but what we can do is we can create a separate insurance plan that is tagged on to state taxes. So we have to, you know, get creative about this and use some loopholes. But I think that we do have the ability, based on how much everybody in the state of Michigan currently pays, which is between $5,000 and $10,000 a year for healthcare, to at least have that cost with a state-run insurance plan that is a state plan for everybody with a few different tiers. My initial thought is probably about 4, maybe 5 tiers for people based on catastrophic all the way up to large families. And certainly this is something that in order to really make the plan work, once elected, we need to sit down with all the stakeholders, including people who are affected by insurance, who have long-term diseases, and people who are doctors and nurses, and bring everybody to the table and really go, okay, so what do we need to include in these plans? And let's start working on how do we make sure that the costs and everything is going to be done correctly.
Yeah, and the idea of bringing that over into a state-run plan and especially with the tiers and coming up with those in conjunction with the with the professionals in the field. Just that really, seems like you've put a lot of thought into this.
Yes, and it's really more high level because I'm not an expert in the field. And so when I'm thinking about this plan, I'm like, I could get into all that research right now, but I'm not the one who needs to be doing all of it, right? Like we need all of the stakeholders to be able, including people who have, the long-term illnesses and people who have dealt with very expensive short-term illnesses. I think, people who've really like dealt with the system currently, including people who are also professionals within the fields, all need to be at the table when we create these plans. And that's why I'm really keeping it on a high level, because I think that this is what will work with the system that we currently have to create a single payer system and remove profit from our healthcare. But I really want to make sure that everyone is going to be represented and that I don't lose any voices when it comes to creating this plan, because I don't want to have these loopholes that people fall through like we currently have.
Right. And I would agree with that. That sounds very smart. There's so many people fall through the loopholes, and so many people have an issue with being able to afford medical care right now, and so many people without it at all. And a lot of that has to do with jobs and the economy. So let's go ahead and turn that direction.
Okay. So within my small business plan and my economic plan are a couple things. Number one, of course, I'm running on a Green New Deal, which means that we need to transition to 100% clean, green, renewable energy. And in Michigan, it's really unique because we have a lot of old buildings that have been used for manufacturing that have kind of gone derelict. And we have a lot of people who are in the trades, who are skilled, who we can put to work to win good union jobs, making farms and solar panels. Plus we have the Great Lakes. And I think that we have the engineers and the people here in the state of Michigan as well, who have the knowledge to start doing some experiments and building on what Europe has already done with hydro energy and really utilize our Great Lakes as energy as well. So that's a couple ways that we can, of course, immediately get some good paying jobs that are green jobs. And then also, I think it's really important when looking at the Great Recession and how other states were not hit as hard as Michigan were, are states that had really strong small business local economies. And so I think that the state needs to create a plan that is going to give grants to people who have business plans, who want to start their own business but don't have the capital. And in tiers from 5,000 all the way up to 15,000. And then of course, for certain industries and things like that, we'll have to talk about plans for, people who need larger capital than that for other types of industries. But just anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000 for people to be able to start their own business is really going to change lives and change our economy. And I want that to include supports. So one of the things that's in my plan is also to make our public colleges free and then move into our public universities. We want to make sure that that model works first in our public colleges before we move on to universities. But in the public college piece, I want to make sure we have supports for those people that are getting the grants for their small businesses, so that they have supports in specifically for sure two ways, which is marketing and accounting. Because you can give people money to start their own business, but if they don't know how to properly market it, and if they don't know really the accounting that goes into their business, then they're not going to be successful. And I'm not the kind of person who thinks throwing money at a problem is going to solve it.
Right.
You certainly need to give money to a problem to solve it, but you also need the supports around it. And so those are some pieces and components of my small business plan.
Okay, well that's very awesome. That's very similar. I ran for Congress this last go round, lost in the primary, but that was a small business plan was also in my campaign, so on my platform. So I really appreciate seeing that on yours.
Thank you.
We're getting closer towards the end, so I would like to at this point have you address veterans. I'm a veteran. A lot of my viewers are veterans, and so it's very important to me, and that's why I like to make sure to include that in each of my shows. And I see that your lieutenant governor, your running mate, is a veteran. So,
yes.
so you have a veteran on your ticket, which is a very a strong point for you. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about your veterans platform.
All right. So actually, Shar and I sat down together, and we made sure that we had a veterans platform. It was really important to her.
Mm-hmm.
And so therefore it was also very important to me, because we are a team together. And so really kind of the major points are that, we should not have veterans who are homeless or who don't have proper health care, or who don't have the proper supports. And so, that certainly falls within, when we talk about universal health care and a single payer plan, that although there are, a lot of benefits that come from the VA, there certainly are still people that fall through the cracks.
Mm-hmm.
And things that the VA doesn't cover. And so I think it's really important that a state plan would cover additional supports that veterans need, including potentially expanding what doctors they can go to, because I know that's still sometimes a problem when it comes to the VA.
Mm-hmm.
But really, the housing piece, I think, is really key. Because here in Michigan, the state actually has a state land bank, we have county land banks, and we have city land banks all around the state. And what has been happening with our land banks is that these local authorities are bouncing homes back and forth between the authorities until they have enough homes that are in a block, and they're selling them to corporations instead of selling them to people and having individual families be able to own their own homes. And I think that's a shameful stain in our state and how we are addressing this type of housing, especially as the number of homeless people are increasing in the state of Michigan, and especially for homeless veterans. I think we can not just end homelessness for veterans, but we can end homelessness, period, across the board with all of the homes that are currently in our land bank by getting the priority on keeping people in their homes and having families in homes rather than selling these blocks to corporations. And so there's certain, I'm a big fan of grants. I think grants are the best way that states can do these kinds of like asset transfers from the state to individuals. I think certainly, especially for veterans, that we really need to have a program that within our land banks, that veterans are able to buy a home, whether it be with money down or no money down or whatever, but to be able to get people into these homes that are in these land banks and help them also with fixing them up, so that they have like a real true home, and we're really starting to build our communities back up again.
Yeah, that, I like those ideas that you have. Those, again, another thing that you guys put a lot of thought into. And, sometimes it just is mind-boggling the way that politicians today pander to big business. And the idea that you would have a land bank and you have people that need homes, but yet they would rather collect these and give them, sell them to some corporation for pennies on the dollar than sell it to, an individual for pennies on the dollar. If you're doing it pennies on the dollar anyway, why does it have to be to a corporation? And those are some of the things that just like I said, are mind-boggling. So we are at the end here. So I would like you to take just a moment and give a very, just very quickly speak directly to your constituents and tell them, why they should be voting for you. Give them your website and where they can donate to you.
All right. So I am the candidate in this race that has the most diverse background. So I have the understanding of elections in Michigan, of the environment in Michigan, of how small business really works and operates, how public education works and operates, and how we can really transform our economy with a background in not just political science, but my degree is in political science, public affairs, which is the policy-driven an aspect of political science, which I think is currently broken. And I think it's really important for the person who is in charge of our state as the CEO of our state that really knows all of these issues around our state and understands that this is not just a financial issue, but without throwing the finance piece out, understanding that this is a human issue. All of these issues around our state are very much connected. You can't talk about housing without talking about public education. You can't talk about public education without talking about the economy. You can't talk about the economy without talking about the environment. all of these things are interconnected. And I am the only person running in this race who has the experience and the knowledge and the background to really transform our state and start moving forward into a better future. So you can find out more about my campaign at my website, which is www.kurland4michigan.com. That's KURLAND, the number 4, Michigan.com. You can just do a /donate, and that'll get you to my donation page. And you can also find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing these ideas. And you know, I really appreciate that holistic approach that you have towards this, because it's, you know, this is exactly, you know, the thing that I was doing. So different state, different places, but, you know, I just really appreciate that. And good luck in November.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you having me on, Mad.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It was a pleasure. And thanks all of you for watching. Go out and make an informed choice and vote. And I'll see all of you next time on Get Mad.